The fluorescent lights of County General's emergency room entrance buzzed overhead as the old man collapsed against the concrete barrier, his worn flannel shirt dark with sweat despite the cold November night. Security guard Vincent Torres had seen hundreds of homeless people outside these doors over his 12 years on the job, but something about the way this one fell made him move faster than usual. Not the theatrical collapse of someone looking for attention, not the slow slide of intoxication. This was the drop of a body that had simply reached its limit. "Sir!" Torres knelt beside him, one hand already reaching for his radio. "Sir, can you hear me?" The old man's eyes opened, gray and clouded with pain, but they focused on Torres with an intensity that seemed out of place in someone who looked like he had been sleeping under bridges. "Yes, sir," he whispered, the words barely audible. His hand moved toward his chest, trembling, pressing against his ribs where his shirt was torn and stained with something that might have been blood, or might have been rust, or might have been the accumulated grime of months on the street. "I apologize for the inconvenience." Torres felt something shift in his chest at those words. Apologizing. Even now, he triggered his radio and called for a gurney, then looked back at the man's face. The weathered skin, the hollow cheeks, the gray stubble that hadn't seen a razor in weeks. But underneath all of that, something else. The way he held himself, even in collapse. The automatic respect in his voice. Within 90 seconds, 2 ER techs had the old man on a gurney and were wheeling him through the automated doors into the chaos of County General's Friday night shift. Torres followed, something pulling at him that he couldn't quite name. He had been a Desert Storm veteran himself, 20 years in security now, and he had learned to recognize certain things. Certain bearing, certain precision in movement, even when the body was failing. The techs wheeled the gurney into Trauma Bay 3, where Dr. Mitchell Brennan stood reviewing charts on a tablet, his white coat pristine, his salt and pepper hair perfectly styled despite the late hour. He looked up as they brought the old man in, and his expression shifted immediately. The professional concern vanished, replaced by something that looked like distaste mixed with annoyance. "Another one," Brennan said, his voice loud enough that the medical students clustered nearby could hear clearly. Every Friday night, like clockwork, he stepped closer to the gurney, keeping his distance as if poverty might be contagious. Vitals. The tech rattled off numbers. BP 70 over 40 and dropping. Heart rate 140. RESP rate 28 and shallow. Temp 95.2. Possible internal bleeding, possible sepsis, possible, probably drunk. Brennan cut in, his voice dripping with certainty. Probably fell and hit his head somewhere, slept it off in an alley. Now wants us to fix what cheap vodka broke. He made a show of leaning closer, theatrically sniffing. "Though I don't smell alcohol. Must be something else." Nurse Sarah Chun moved to the opposite side of the gurney, her hands already working efficiently to get 4 lines started. She was 29, 5 years into emergency nursing, and she had learned to keep her face neutral when doctors like Brennan performed for their audience. "Sir," she said softly to the man on the gurney, "I'm Sarah. I'm going to help you. Can you tell me your name?" The old man's eyes found hers. "Raymond," he whispered. "Raymond Castellano." His breathing was labored, each word costing him. "Been sick. Few days. Try to wait it out. I apologize for coming here." Sarah felt her hand slow for just a fraction of a second at those words. Apologizing again. For seeking medical help. For existing. She resumed her work, sliding the 4-needle home with practiced precision, but something in her chest tightened. Brennan picked up the clipboard, scanning it without real interest. No insurance, I assume. No fixed address. No emergency contact. He looked at the medical students, making sure they were paying attention to his lesson. This is what we call a frequent flyer. They come in, get stabilized, get discharged, and come right back because they won't take care of themselves. It's a drain on the system. A drain on resources that could go to people who actually contribute to society. Raymond's eyes closed briefly, but Sarah saw his jaw tighten slightly. She saw his hands, resting on his chest now, scarred and weathered but somehow too precise in their movements. She saw the way he automatically straightened slightly when Brennan spoke, despite the obvious pain. Small things. But she had been a nurse long enough to recognize when small things added up to something larger. "Doctor," she said quietly, "his pressure is still dropping. We need to stabilize him," Brennan interrupted. "Get fluids going. Run basic labs. But nothing extensive. We have actual emergencies coming in, and I'm not going to tie up a bay for someone who probably just needs a sandwich and a lecture about personal responsibility." He turned back to his tablet, already moving on mentally. What Brennan didn't know, what nobody in that emergency room knew yet, was that in exactly 4 hours, his career would be over. That in exactly 4 hours, he would be on his knees, his face white with shock, his hands trembling as he tried to form words of apology to a man he had just called a drain on society. What he didn't know was that the homeless man on the gurney in front of him had once held the life of 24 wounded soldiers in his hands during an 18-hour siege in Mogadishu. That those scarred, weathered hands had performed emergency battlefield surgery under sniper fire. That the man he was dismissing with contempt had been awarded the Medal of Honor by the President of the United States. But Sarah Chan was beginning to suspect something. As she adjusted Raymond's foreline and checked his vitals again, she noticed his hands. Really noticed them. The scars weren't the random marks of street life. They were surgical, precise. The kind of scars that came from repeated precise movements with sharp instruments. And when her fingers brushed his wrist to check his pulse, she felt something beneath his shirt. Something metal on a chain. If you're watching this story from anywhere in the world, we would love to know where you're joining us from. Drop a comment below telling us your city or country. And if stories like this one about courage, sacrifice, and second chances speak to you, please consider subscribing to our channel. Your support helps us share more incredible true stories that honor the forgotten heroes among us. Now, let us continue. Raymond's breathing grew more shallow, each rise and fall of his chest requiring visible effort. Sarah watched the monitors, watched the numbers that told her his body was shutting down. She reached for the torn collar of his flannel shirt, gently moving it aside to check for injuries, and that was when she saw them. Dog tags, worn and scratched, hanging from a ball chain that had lost most of its finish. She leaned closer, trying to read the engraving without disturbing him. "Doctor," she said, her voice cutting through the ambient noise of the ER. "You need to see this." Brennan looked up from his tablet with obvious irritation. "See what exactly?" "More drama. More performance." "He has dog tags," Sarah said quietly. Brennan crossed the space in 3 steps, his expression shifting to something that looked almost eager. He reached down and took the tags in his fingers, not gently, turning them to catch the light. His eyebrows rose, then his mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. More like satisfaction at being proven right about something. "Army surplus," he announced, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You can buy these at any military memorabilia shop for $15-20. He let the tags drop back against Raymond's chest with a small metallic clink. "I've seen it 12 times. Homeless veterans, or people claiming to be veterans, wearing props they picked up at swap meets. It's actually offensive to real service members." Torres, still standing near the entrance to the bay, felt his jaw tighten. He stepped forward slightly. "Doctor, maybe we should—" "This is exactly what I was talking about," Brennan continued, cutting Torres off, still addressing his medical students. "Stolen valor. They think a set of fake dog tags will get them better treatment, faster service, maybe some sympathy. But we see through it." He looked down at Raymond, whose eyes were closed now, his breathing rapid and shallow. "We're not fooled." Sarah's hands moved automatically, checking lines, adjusting monitors, doing what needed to be done even as her mind raced. She had seen the tags, close enough to read the name stamped into the metal. Castellano, Raymond J., blood type A positive, religion Catholic, and beneath that, worn almost smooth but still barely legible, U.S. Army. The tags were old, decades old, the kind of wear that didn't come from a surplus store. "His pressure's at 65/35, she said quietly. "Doctor, we're losing him." Brennan glanced at the monitors, then back at his tablet. "Keep the fluids going. If he stabilizes, we'll move him to a floor bed. If not—" He paused, And in that pause, Sarah heard everything he wasn't saying. If not, we have other patients who matter more. Other patients who contribute. Other patients who deserve our resources. Raymond's lips moved, forming words too soft for anyone except Sarah to hear. She leaned down, her ear close to his mouth. Still here, he whispered, the words barely breath. Still trying. And then the monitor alarm began to sound. The morphine hit Raymond's bloodstream like a wave, pulling him under, and suddenly he wasn't in County General anymore. He was 26 years old again, standing in a hangar at Mogadishu International Airport, the heat pressing down like a physical weight even though the sun hadn't fully risen yet. The air smelled like jet fuel and sand and the particular tension that came before a mission that everyone knew was going to be bad. Carlos Martinez stood beside him, checking his medical kit for the third time, his fingers moving with the same precision Raymond had learned to mirror over 2 years of operating together. Point medic and trauma medic. First one in, last one out. They had pulled 17 wounded out of firefights together, never lost a single one who made it to their hand alive. You ready for this? Ghost, Carlos said, using the call sign Raymond had earned after moving through a night infiltration so quietly that his team leader swore he had disappeared into thin air. This one's going to be hot. Raymond adjusted the straps on his medical ruck, feeling the weight of supplies that could mean the difference between a soldier going home or going home in a box. As ready as I'll ever be, he said. You, always, brother. Carlos grinned, that easy smile that made everyone around him feel like maybe things would be okay. Always ready. He pulled out a photograph from his breast pocket, showed it to Raymond for the 100th time. My Amelia, 3 years old next month. When I get back, I'm taking 2 weeks leave. Going to Disneyland. The whole thing. Raymond looked at the photo of the little girl with dark curls and Carlos's smile. She's going to love it, he said. Make sure you get the mouse ears. The whole package. The briefing started then, officers explaining the mission to capture 2 of Mohammed Farah Aided's top lieutenants from a building in the Bakara market. Quick in, quick out. 30 minutes tops. Raymond listened to the timeline, the exfiltration plan, the casualty estimates, and felt something cold settle in his stomach. The numbers were too clean, too optimistic. He had been in country long enough to know that missions never went according to plan in Mogadishu. In the present, in the emergency room, Sarah Chan worked quickly to stabilize Raymond as the monitor alarm screamed. She had called for the crash cart, had other nurses swarming the bay now, but Brennan still hadn't authorized anything beyond basic intervention. She watched Raymond's face, saw his eyes moving rapidly beneath closed lids, saw his lips forming words she couldn't quite hear. 2.0469 degrees north, Raymond whispered, his voice hoarse and distant. 45.3182 degrees east. October 3rd, 1993. Sarah's hands paused for just a fraction of a second. Coordinates. He was reciting coordinates. And a date. She filed away in her mind as she pushed medications, as she worked to bring his pressure back up from the edge of nothing. The memory dragged Raymond deeper. The Black Hawks lifting off, 16 birds carrying Rangers and Delta operators into the heart of Mogadishu. Raymond and Carlos in the Trailbird, medical supplies distributed between them, both of them running through the mental checklist of triage protocols. Who gets treated first? How to stop arterial bleeding in 30 seconds. How to keep a sucking chest wound from collapsing along. They had done it so many times in training that it was automatic now. Muscle memory. The insertion went smooth. Fast ropes down to the street, boots hitting dust, immediate security perimeter. Raymond and Carlos moved to their designated position, a doorway with good sight lines, and waited. This was the part that always felt the longest. The waiting. Listening to radio chatter as the assault team moved through the target building. Listening for the calls that would mean they were needed. Then the RPG hit Super 6-1. Raymond heard it before he saw it, that distinctive whoosh and crack of a rocket-propelled grenade finding its target. The Black Hawk shuddered in the air, smoke pouring from its tail rotor, and began to spin. He watched it fall, watched it crash 3 blocks away, and felt his training take over. Medic. That was his job. Get to the crash. Get to the wounded. The radio came alive with calls for rescue, for air support, for anyone who could get to the crash site. Carlos was already moving, his medical ruck on his back, his rifle in his hands. Raymond followed, both of them running through streets that were beginning to fill with armed Somalis. The mission timeline had just gone from 30 minutes to however long it took to get everyone out alive. In the emergency room, Torres watched the monitors, watched Sarah working, and felt that pull again. Something about the way Raymond held himself, even unconscious. Something about those coordinates he kept muttering. Torres pulled out his phone, opened a browser, typed in the numbers. The search results came back immediately. Mogadishu, Somalia. The Battle of Mogadishu. October 3rd, 1993. Black Hawk down. Torres felt his breath catch. He looked at Raymond's face, at the weathered features and gray stubble, and did the math. If he had been there in 93, he would be late 60s now. The age matched. He scrolled through the search results, looking for anything about medics, about casualties, about heroes. The memory pulled Raymond to the crash site. Super 6-1 had come down hard. The fuselage crumpled, the rotors bent and broken. Wounded everywhere. The pilot trapped in the cockpit. Crew chief with a compound fracture. Rangers with shrapnel wounds, bullet wounds, blast injuries. Raymond and Carlos moved through them with practiced efficiency, stopping bleeding, starting IVs, calling out conditions and priorities. "We need to move them," Carlos said, his hands covered in blood as he worked on a ranger with a sucking chest wound. "We can't hold this position." Raymond was working on the pilot, trying to free him from the twisted metal of his seat. "Not yet," he said. "Not until we get him out. We don't leave anyone behind." That was when the firing started in earnest. AK-47 rounds pinging off the wreckage, RPGs streaking overhead. The Rangers formed a defensive perimeter, returning fire, but they were surrounded. Hundreds of Somali militia moving in. Raymond kept working, his hands steady despite the chaos. Carlos moved to help him, both of them pulling at the warped metal, both of them knowing that every second mattered. They got the pilot free, got him on a stretcher, got him ready to move. The convoy was coming, fighting its way through the streets to extract them. They just had to hold until the vehicles arrived. Sarah had Raymond's pressure stabilized, barely, hovering at 80/50. Not good, but not immediately dying. She checked his temperature, checked his oxygen saturation, checked everything she could check while Brennan stood 10 feet away, making notes on his tablet, and occasionally glancing over with that expression of distaste still on his face. The convoy arrived in the memory, Humvees and trucks, a lifeline through hostile streets. Raymond and Carlos loaded wounded, moving with speed born of training and desperation. 18 hours. That was how long they would end up fighting. 18 hours of treating wounds, of holding positions, of watching brothers die. But Raymond didn't know that yet. In this moment, he still believed they would all make it out. Carlos was moving toward another wounded ranger when a sniper around hit him. High-powered rifle, probably a Dragunov based on the sound. The round caught him in the upper chest, just above his vest, and Raymond saw the spray of blood before Carlos even fell. No, Raymond heard himself say it in the memory, heard himself saying it in the hospital bed. No, no, no. He was beside Carlos in seconds, his hands already moving, already applying pressure to the wound. But he could feel it, could feel the way the blood pulsed against his palms with each heartbeat, could feel the heat of it, the volume of it. Subclavian artery. Maybe the worst wound a medic could face in the field, because there was no good way to stop it. Pressure was all you had. Pressure and prayer. Carlos's eyes found his, still conscious, still aware. His hand reached up, gripped Raymond's arm. "Not your fault," he whispered. His voice was already weak. "Not your fault, Ghost. Never your fault." Raymond kept pressure, kept calling for help, kept doing everything he had been trained to do. He counted the seconds. 30, 60, 90. He felt the moment Carlos's heart stopped trying. Felt the life leave his best friend's body despite everything Raymond knew, everything he could do. When they finally extracted, when they finally made it back to base 18 hours later, Raymond still had Carlos's blood under his nails. Still had it in the creases of his palms. He washed his hands for 20 minutes, and it wouldn't come out. Not really. Not ever. In the emergency room, Raymond's eyes opened. His hand moved to his chest, to the pocket of his torn flannel shirt, where something small and metal rested. Sarah saw the movement, saw tears on his face now, mixing with the sweat. "Carlos," Raymond whispered. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Sarah leaned closer. "Sir, you're in the hospital. You're safe. We're taking care of you." But Raymond wasn't talking to her. He was talking to a dead man who had been his brother, who had died in his arms 32 years ago, who he carried every single day. The monitor showed his heart rate climbing again, his pressure dropping again, and Sarah knew they were running out of time. Brennan stepped closer to the gurney as Sarah worked to stabilize Raymond's vitals. His expression, one of clinical curiosity mixed with something that looked like vindication. He reached down and lifted the dog tags again, holding them up to the light as if they were evidence in a trial he had already won. "Look at this," he said to the medical students who had gathered closer. "See how the metal is worn. See how the engraving is faded." He turned the tags over in his fingers. "These are what we call convincing fakes. Someone put effort into making these look authentic. Probably bought them online from one of those military memorabilia sites that artificially age the metal." He let the tags drop back against Raymond's chest with deliberate carelessness. "They bank on the fact that most people don't know what real service looks like." One of the medical students, a young woman with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, raised her hand slightly. "Dr. Brennan, shouldn't we at least verify before making assumptions?" Brennan's smile was thin and patronizing. "That's exactly the kind of thinking that gets exploited, Miss Rodriguez. These people count on your sympathy. They count on you second-guessing your professional judgment because you feel bad about their circumstances." He gestured toward Raymond. "Look at him. Really look at him. Does this look like someone who served his country with honor? Or does it look like someone who gave up on himself and wants us to pick up the pieces?" Torres felt his jaw clench from where he stood near the bay entrance. 20 years of keeping his mouth shut in the face of doctors who thought security guards were beneath notice. 20 years of watching, listening, staying professional. But something about the way Brennan was handling those tags, the casual dismissal, the theatrical performance for the students, it made his hands curl into fists at his sides. Sarah ignored Brennan's lecture and focused on her patient. She had gotten Raymond's pressure back up to 78/45, had his oxygen saturation climbing toward 90%. Not great, but stable enough to think beyond the next 60 seconds. She needed to do a full assessment, needed to document his belongings, needed to follow protocol. Her hands moved to Raymond's pockets, checking for identification, for medication bottles, for anything that might help her understand what was wrong with him. His right pocket held nothing but lint and a few coins. His left pocket held something small and metal. Sarah pulled it out carefully. A combat medic badge, the caduceus and staff worn almost smooth, one corner broken off. The metal was warm from being against Raymond's body, and there was something dark in the fine engraving that might have been old blood, or might have been dirt, or might have been both. She turned it over. Engraved on the back in letters so small she had to squint to read them. CPLC, Martinez. With love from Amelia. Sarah felt something cold slide down her spine. She looked at the medical student who had spoken up, the one Brennan had called Miss Rodriguez. Looked at her name tag, Emily Rodriguez. Then back at the badge in her hand. Then at Raymond's face, his eyes closed, his lips still moving in silent conversation with the dead. "Doctor," Sarah said quietly, "I found something else." Brennan didn't even look up from his tablet. "More props, I imagine. A Purple Heart from a pawn shop. A Bronze Star from eBay. These people are thorough, I'll give them that. It's a combat medic badge," Sarah continued, "with a name engraved on it. Carlos Martinez." Emily Rodriguez's head snapped up, her face suddenly pale. Her hand went to her own name tag, as if to confirm what it said. "What did you say?" Sarah held out the badge. "Carlos Martinez. It says with love from Amelia." Emily took a step forward, then another, her professional composure cracking. She reached for the badge with trembling fingers. "My father's name was Carlos Martinez. He was killed in Somalia in 1993. I was 3 years old. Her voice was barely above a whisper. My mother gave him a badge, just like this, before he deployed. She had it engraved with my name. Brennan finally looked up, his expression shifting from dismissive to annoyed. Miss Rodriguez, this is clearly a coincidence. Your father's name isn't exactly uncommon, and neither is the date. This man probably read about the battle online and created a backstory to go with his fake credentials. He waved his hand dismissively. It's manipulative, but it's also predictable. Emily's hands were shaking as she held the badge. She looked at Raymond's face, really looked at it for the first time. "Sir," she said, her voice cracking. "Sir, did you know my father?" Raymond's eyes opened slowly, finding her face. The gray eyes that had seemed clouded with pain suddenly focused with an intensity that made Emily take a half step back. He tried to speak, his lips forming words, but no sound came out at first. Sarah quickly adjusted his oxygen mask, giving him a moment. "You have his eyes," Raymond finally whispered. His voice was rough, damaged, but clear. "The same eyes." He looked at Amelia and told me. He looked at the photo. "Every day before missions. Said he was coming home to take you to Disneyland." Emily's professional composure shattered completely. Tears streamed down her face as she gripped the badge so hard her knuckles went white. "Were you there?" she asked. "Were you with him when—" Raymond's own eyes filled with tears. "I held him," he said. 90 seconds. I tried everything." His hand moved toward Emily, trembling. "I promised him. I promised I would find you. Tell you he loved you. That his last words were your name." Torres had pulled out his phone while Brennan continued to protest, while Emily cried, while Sarah stood frozen between them. He had found what he was looking for. A military database. A list of Medal of Honor recipients from Somalia. And there, third from the top, Sergeant Raymond J. Castellano, United States Army Special Forces Medical Sergeant. Awarded for extraordinary heroism during the Battle of Mogadishu, October 34, 1993. Treated 24 wounded soldiers under sustained enemy fire during 18-hour siege. Remained behind with critically wounded to ensure no soldier left behind. Multiple acts of valor resulting in saving numerous lives. Torres walked forward, his security guard uniform suddenly feeling too small, too insignificant. "Dr. Brennan," he said. His voice was quiet, but it carried. Brennan turned, irritation clear on his face. "What is it, Torres?" "We're in the middle of patient care." Torres held up his phone, screen facing out. "You need to see this. Right now." "I don't have time for—" Brennan started. "It's a Medal of Honor citation," Torres said. His voice was steady, but something underneath, it was steel. "For Sergeant Raymond J. Castellano. For actions in Mogadishu. October 3rd and 4th, 1993. The trauma bay went silent except for the beeping of monitors and the soft hiss of oxygen. Brennan stared at the phone screen, his face going through a series of expressions. Disbelief. Confusion. The first creeping edge of something that might have been horror. "That could be anyone with the same name," Brennan said, but his voice had lost its certainty. "It's a common name. Could be a different person." Torres scrolled down. "There's a photo from the ceremony at the White House." He turned the phone so everyone could see. The image showed a young man in dress uniform, his face serious, his bearing rigid at attention. The same eyes, the same jawline under 32 fewer years of pain and homelessness. Standing next to him in the photo, a young woman with a baby in her arms. A caption below identified her as Mrs. Elena Martinez, widow of Corporal Carlos Martinez, and daughter Amelia. Emily made a sound that was half sob, half gasp. She reached for the phone, staring at the image of her mother and herself as an infant, standing next to the man who now lay dying on a gurney 10 feet away. Sarah's hands moved automatically, checking Raymond's vitals again, adjusting his four, doing what nurses do when the world shifts beneath their feet. But she was looking at Brennan, watching the color drain from his face, watching the realization hit him like a physical blow. "Those aren't fake," Torres said quietly. "Those dog tags are real. That badge is real. And you just called a Medal of Honor recipient a drain on society." Brennan opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "I didn't. I couldn't have known. You could have asked, Sarah said. Her voice was soft, but every word landed like a hammer. You could have treated him like a human being instead of making assumptions. You could have done your job instead of performing for an audience. Raymond's hand found Emily's, his weathered, scarred fingers closing around hers with surprising gentleness. Your father, he whispered, bravest man I ever knew. Saved my life 100 times before I couldn't save his. Emily squeezed his hand, tears falling onto their joined fingers. You did save him, she said. You tried. That's what matters. That's what my mother always said. Someone tried. The monitors began alarming again. Raymond's pressure dropping, his oxygen saturation falling. Sarah moved quickly, but her eyes found Brennan's face. We need to authorize full treatment. Imaging. Surgery, consult. Whatever he needs. Brennan stood frozen, his tablet hanging limp in his hand, his carefully constructed authority crumbling as every person in that trauma bay looked at him with expressions ranging from anger to disgust to pity. The morphine pulled Raymond under again, but this time the memory was different. This time it wasn't Mogadishu. This time it was 4 years ago, standing in a kitchen that smelled like coffee and vanilla, watching his wife Jennifer move around the counter with the same grace she had possessed for 30 years of marriage. She was humming something, an old song they had danced to at their wedding, and the afternoon light caught in her hair, turning the gray strand silver. Ray, she had said, turning to face him with that smile that had gotten him through 3 combat tours and 100 nightmares. Tell me again about the first time Carlos showed you that photo of Amelia. Raymond had smiled, leaning against the counter, his coffee mug warm in his hands. He pulled it out before every mission, he said. Every single time. Told me he was going to take her to Disneyland when he got back. Get the mouse ears, the whole package. Jennifer had crossed to him, her hand finding his cheek. And you promised him you'd find her if something happened. I promised, Raymond had said. But I couldn't. After he died, after everything, I tried to find Elena and Amelia, but they'd moved. I had their old address, but they were gone. I looked for years. You did everything you could, Jennifer had said, and that was the thing about her. She had always known what to say, had always known how to pull him back from the edge when the guilt got too heavy. You saved 24 men that day. 24 soldiers went home to their families because of you. But Carlos didn't, Raymond had whispered. Jennifer had kissed him then, soft and gentle. No, Carlos didn't. And that wasn't your fault. The memory shifted, twisted, became darker. 6 months later, Jennifer in a hospital bed, her skin paper thin, her breathing labored. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. Diagnosed too late. Moving too fast. The doctors gave her weeks. She lasted 3. Raymond had sat beside her bed every single day, holding her hand, watching her slip away piece by piece. And when she finally went, when her heart finally stopped despite every prayer he had whispered, despite every bargain he had tried to make with a God who seemed to have stopped listening somewhere around Mogadishu, something in Raymond had broken that no amount of training or discipline could fix. He had gone home to their house, had looked at their daughter, Amelia, 28 years old, and so much like her mother, it physically hurt to see her face. Had looked at the photos on the walls, the memories in every room, the weight of everything he had lost crushing down on him until he couldn't breathe. I can't do this, he had told his daughter. I can't be here. I can't look at you and see her and know she's gone. Dad, Amelia had said, tears streaming down her face. We need each other. We can get through this together. But Raymond had seen the truth in her eyes, had seen that she was drowning too, had seen that she needed someone strong, and all he had to offer was broken pieces. So he had written a note, had packed a single bag, had walked out the door at dawn and never looked back. I love you, the note had said. I'm sorry. Live your life. Don't look for me. You deserve better than what I've become. For years of sleeping under bridges and in shelters. For years of carrying Jennifer's photo in his wallet and Carlos's badge in his pocket. For years of daily visits to the Vietnam Memorial Wall, where his father's name was etched, standing there and reciting the names of everyone he'd lost. Carlos, Jennifer, his own sense of purpose, his own will to keep fighting. In the emergency room, Sarah had Raymond stabilized enough to run basic labs, but she knew they needed more. Needed imaging. Needed to know what was bleeding inside him. She looked at Brennan, who still stood frozen, the weight of his mistake written across his face in shame and dawning horror. "We need a CT scan," Sarah said. "Full abdomen and chest. He's got internal bleeding somewhere, and we're running out of time." Brennan's mouth opened, but no words came out. He looked at the medical students, at Torres, at Emily, who was still holding Raymond's hand and crying silently. He looked at his tablet, as if it might contain some answer to how this had gone so catastrophically wrong. "Doctor," Sarah's voice was sharper now. "He needs imaging. He needs a surgery consult. He needs you to do your job." Torres stepped forward, his phone still in his hand. "I've called the hospital administrator," he said quietly. "Patricia Wells is on her way. She's going to want answers about why a Medal of Honor recipient was denied appropriate care." Brennan's face went from pale to ashen. The administrator, his career flashing before his eyes in real time. Everything he had built, everything he had worked for, crumbling because he had been too arrogant to look past appearances, too certain of his own judgment to ask questions. "Do whatever he needs," Brennan said, his voice hollow. "Full imaging. Surgery consult. Whatever it takes." Sarah was already moving, already calling for transport to radiology, already organizing the next steps. But part of her was watching Raymond's face, watching the tears that continued to stream from his closed eyes, watching his lips move in silent conversation with ghosts. In a memory, Raymond was standing at the memorial wall. It was early morning, the sky just beginning to lighten, and he was alone. He had been coming here every day for 4 years, standing in front of his father's name, whispering the litany of the dead. "Dad," he would say, "Carlos, Jennifer," the names of the 24 he had saved, the names of the 6 who had died anyway. Miguel, James, Patterson, Rodriguez. The list went on and on. "Still here," he would whisper, "still trying. But I don't know why anymore. I don't know what I'm trying for." He had become invisible. That was what 4 years on the street did. People looked through you, past you, around you. You stopped being human and became part of the landscape. Just another homeless veteran that society had used up and discarded. Just another broken man with a sign and a story nobody wanted to hear. But he had kept coming to the wall, kept reciting the names, kept carrying Carlos's badge and Jennifer's photo, kept existing because stopping felt like the final betrayal of everyone he had lost. Today had been different, though. Today he had woken up sick, fever burning through him, pain in his abdomen that felt like something tearing. He had tried to wait it out, tried to treat himself with the knowledge from 30 years as a medic. But his body was failing him. For the first time in 4 years, he had broken his own rule. He had sought help. And look where that had gotten him. Mocked, dismissed, called a fraud. Part of him had wanted to just get up and leave. Go back to the bridge where he slept. Die there quietly where nobody would care and nobody would judge. But then he had thought about Carlos, about Jennifer, about his daughter Amelia, who he hadn't seen in 4 years. Not yet, he had thought. Not like this. Emily's voice pulled him back to the present, her hand squeezing his. "Sir," she was saying, "Raymond, my father would want you to fight. He would want you to live." Raymond's eyes opened, finding her face. So much like Carlos. The same determination, the same fire. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I couldn't save him. I tried everything, every technique, every procedure, but the bleeding wouldn't stop." Emily's tears fell onto their joined hands. "You tried. That's what matters. You stayed with him. He didn't die alone." The memory of Carlos's last moments flooded back. The way his hand had gripped Raymond's arm. The way he had smiled even as the life drained out of him. "Not your fault, Ghost. Never your fault. Tell my girls I love them. Tell Amelia her daddy was thinking about mouse ears." "I never found you," Raymond whispered to Emily. "I looked for years, but you'd moved. I couldn't keep my promise to him. You found me now," Emily said. "Right here, right now. And I need you to fight. I need you to live so you could tell me everything about him. Every story, every memory, everything he wanted me to know." Raymond's hand tightened around hers. The first human touch with kindness in 4 years. The first connection to something that wasn't grief or guilt or ghosts. I'll try, he whispered. The transport team arrived to take Raymond to radiology. Sarah organized the movement, ensuring every line stayed secure, every monitor stayed connected. Emily walked beside the gurney, still holding his hand, still crying but also smiling through the tears. Brennan stood alone in the trauma bay, watching them go, understanding with perfect clarity that his career was over. That in less than 30 minutes, Patricia Wells would arrive and ask questions he had no good answers for. That the medical students who had watched him perform were now witnesses to the worst mistake of his professional life. And somewhere in a wallet that Sarah had secured with Raymond's belongings, a photo waited. A young girl with dark curls and Jennifer's smile. Raymond's daughter. The one he had abandoned because he couldn't face his grief. The one he had been watching from a distance for 4 years, tracking her life through social media posts and annual visits to her workplace just to make sure she was okay. The one whose name he whispered every night before sleep came. Still here, he had said to the wall that morning. Still trying. And for the first time in 4 years, he meant it. The CT scanner hummed around Raymond's body as Sarah stood in the control room, watching the images appear on the screen slice by slice. What she saw made her chest tighten. A ruptured spleen. Significant internal bleeding. Free fluid in the abdomen. He needed surgery, and he needed it now. She reached for the phone to call the surgical team, but before she could dial, the door to the control room opened and a woman in a navy suit walked in. Patricia Wells, hospital administrator, her expression carved from stone. Behind her came Brennan, looking like a man walking to his own execution. "Talk to me," Wells said to Sarah. "No priambid, no pleasantries." Just the hard demand for information from someone who had been woken at 2 in the morning with news that a Medal of Honor recipient had been denied care at her hospital. Sarah pulled up Raymond's scans, pointing to the areas of concern. Ruptured spleen, active bleeding. He needs emergency surgery or he won't make it through the next few hours. She kept her voice professional, but her eyes flicked to Brennan. "He's been here for 90 minutes and we're just now getting imaging." Wells turned to Brennan. Her voice was quiet, but it cut like a scalpel. "Explain to me why a patient presenting with hypotension and suspected internal bleeding waited 90 minutes for a CT scan." Brennan's mouth opened and closed. "I made an assessment based on..." "Based on what?" Wells interrupted. "Based on the fact that he was homeless. Based on the fact that he didn't look like your idea of a hero." She pulled out her phone, turned it to show him the screen. "Because I have already received 3 emails with video attached. From your medical students. From nurses. From people who watch you mock a Medal of Honor recipient and call his service fake." Brennan's face went from ashen to gray. "I didn't know," he whispered. "You didn't ask," Wells said. "You didn't check. You didn't do the basic due diligence that we expect from first-year residents, much less from an attending physician." She turned back to Sarah. "Get into surgery. Use whatever resources you need. I want our best trauma surgeon on this case." "Already called Dr. McAllister," Sarah said. "He's scrubbing it now." "Good," Wells said. She looked at Brennan again. "You're suspended effective immediately. Security will escort you out. We'll have a formal review board hearing within 72 hours, but I can tell you right now that your employment here is over." Brennan seemed to shrink inside his white coat. "Please," he started. "I've been here 15 years. I've saved lives. Yvette, you violated every principle of medical ethics we hold dear," Wells said. "You let your prejudice override your judgment. You denied care based on appearance. And you did it publicly, in front of students who looked to you as an example." She gestured toward the door. "Security is waiting." As Brennan left, escorted by 2 security guards who wouldn't meet his eyes, Sarah felt no satisfaction. Just exhaustion and the weight of how close they had come to losing Raymond because one doctor couldn't see past his own assumptions. In the pre-op area, Emily Rodriguez sat beside Raymond's gurney, still holding his hand. She had called her mother, woken her at 2 in the morning with news that seemed impossible. "Mom," she had said, her voice shaking. "I found him. I found a medic who was with Dad when he died." Elena Martinez was on her way now, driving through the night from her home an hour away. 32 years of wondering. 32 years of questions about Carlos's last moments. About whether he suffered. about whether he was alone. And now, impossibly, she would have answers. Raymond's eyes were half closed, the pain medication making him drift, but he kept pulling himself back to consciousness. Kept looking at Emily's face. "You look so much like him," he whispered. "Same eyes. Same smile. He was so proud of you. Showed everyone your picture." Emily squeezed his hand. "I don't remember him. I was only 3. All I have are photos and the stories my mother told me." "He loved you," Raymond said. "That was the thing he talked about most. Not the mission, not the war, just you. Taking you to Disneyland. Teaching you to ride a bike. Watching you grow up." His voice cracked. "I'm sorry I couldn't give him that." "You gave him something else," Emily said. "You tried to save him. You stayed with him." She pulled the combat medic badge from her pocket, the one that had been in Raymond's pocket for 32 years. "My mother gave him this the day he deployed. She had my name engraved on it, so he would have a piece of me with him. He carried it in every mission," Raymond said. "I found it after. In his gear. I couldn't leave it behind. Couldn't let it go into some storage facility. So I kept it, carried it everywhere. A reminder of what I lost, of what I failed to save." Torres appeared in the doorway, his security uniform somehow looking more dignified than Brennan's white coat ever had. "There's someone else here," he said quietly. "Someone who wants to see you." Raymond's eyes opened wider, confusion crossing his face. "Who?" Torres stepped aside and a woman walked in. 32 years old, dark hair like her mother, her father's eyes. Raymond's daughter. His Emilia. The one he had abandoned 4 years ago. The one whose name he whispered every night. She stopped 3 feet from the gurney, her arms wrapped around herself as if she was holding her own pieces together. "Dad," she said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Raymond's face crumpled. "No," he said. "You shouldn't be here. You shouldn't see me like this." "I've been looking for you for 4 years," Emilia said, tears streaming down her face. "For years of searching. For years of not knowing if you were alive or dead. And you think I'm going to walk away now because you're in a hospital gown?" Raymond tried to turn his face away, but Emilia moved closer, sat down on the opposite side of the gurney from Emily Rodriguez, took his other hand in both of hers. "I got a call from hospital security," she said. "They found your wallet, found my photo, found the address to my workplace that you'd written on a piece of paper." She squeezed his hand. "Were you watching me?" Raymond's tears came freely now. From a distance, he whispered, "Just to make sure you were okay. I never meant for you to know. Never meant to burden you with." "With what?" Emilia interrupted. "With the fact that my father is alive. That he's been sleeping on the streets for 4 years while I've been searching everywhere. While I've been terrified that I'd get a call from the morgue." She was crying harder now, but her voice was steel underneath. "You don't get to decide what burdens me, Dad. You don't get to choose for me." "I couldn't look at you without seeing her," Raymond said. "Your mother. Every time I looked at you, I saw her dying. I saw everything I couldn't save. Everyone I failed." "You didn't fail, Mom," Emilia said. "Cancer isn't something you can combat medic away. And you didn't fail me. You're here. You're alive. And I need you to stay that way." Sarah appeared with the transport team. "We need to get him to surgery," she said gently. "You can wait in the surgical waiting room. Dr. McAllister is excellent. If anyone can help him, it's him." Emilia stood, but didn't let go of Raymond's hand. "You're going to fight," she said. "You're going to survive this surgery. And then you're coming home with me. No arguments. No running. You're coming home." Raymond looked at his daughter, at Emily Rodriguez, who was also standing now, at Torres, who stood at attention by the door, at all these people who somehow still saw something worth saving in a broken man who had spent 4 years believing he deserved nothing but the streets and the ghosts. "I don't deserve this," he whispered. "That's not your call to make," Emilia said. "We get to decide what you deserve. And we've decided you deserve help. You deserve family. You deserve to live." The transport team began to move the gurney. Both Emilias walked alongside, each holding one of his hands. Emily Rodriguez with her father's badge. Emilia Castellano with 4 years of searching finally over. 2 women connected by a man who had carried their names through hell and back. As they wheeled him toward the surgical suite, Raymond saw Torres snap to attention. Saw the security guard's hand rise in a crisp salute. Not for his rank, not for his medals, but for what he had sacrificed, for what he had carried. Other staff were gathering now. Nurses who had heard the story, technicians who had seen the videos. Even the janitor, an elderly Vietnam veteran, stood with his hand over his heart. A hallway full of witnesses to a moment that should never have been necessary. A Medal of Honor recipient finally getting the respect he deserved. But Raymond only saw his daughter's face, saw her smile through the tears, saw her lips form words he hadn't heard in 4 years. "I love you, Dad." And for the first time since Jennifer died, he believed he might actually deserve to hear them. The surgical waiting room was designed for comfort, but felt like a cage. Emilia Castellano sat in one of the blue vinyl chairs, her leg bouncing with nervous energy, her eyes fixed on the door where someone would eventually emerge with news. Emily Rodriguez sat beside her, both of them connected by the unconscious man being cut open 3 floors above them, and by fathers who had shaped their lives in different ways. "Your name is Emilia too?" Emily said quietly. "It's not exactly common. My mother named me after her grandmother," Emilia said. "Jennifer always said it was a strong name, a survivor's name." She twisted her hands together. "I never knew your father. Never knew Dad had someone he carried all these years." "You talked about your dad constantly," Emily said. "Even in the ER, even unconscious, he was reciting coordinates, saying his name." She pulled out her phone, showed Emilia a photo she had found. "My mother in 1993, holding me at the Medal of Honor ceremony, and your father receiving the medal for saving all those soldiers, including trying to save my dad." Emilia stared at the photo. She had seen the medal, had found it hidden in a box in her mother's closet after the funeral, wrapped in tissue paper and tucked away like it was too painful to look at. She had held it once, feeling the weight of it, reading the citation. Extraordinary heroism, conspicuous gallantry, risking his own life repeatedly to save others. Words that described a man she no longer recognized in the broken homeless person she had been searching for. "He didn't want to be found," Emilia said. "I hired private investigators, posted on forums, called every shelter in 3 states. And the whole time he was close enough to watch me, close enough to know where I worked, but not close enough to let me help him. He was drowning," Emily said. "My mother told me about survivor's guilt, how it can destroy people just as surely as bullets. Your father tried to save mine and couldn't. Tried to save your mother and couldn't. Started believing he couldn't save anyone." The door opened and both women jerked to attention, but it was just Sarah Chun carrying 2 cups of coffee. Torres walked in behind her, still in uniform, still carrying himself with that military bearing that Emilia was beginning to recognize in anyone who had served. "Surgery's going to be a few more hours," Sarah said, handing them the coffee. "Dr. McAllister sent word that they've controlled the bleeding, but there were complications. Infection, malnutrition. His body has been running on empty for so long that it doesn't have much reserve left. But he's going to make it," Emilia said. It wasn't a question. It was a demand. Sarah's smile was gentle. "He's a fighter." McAllister said he's never seen someone with vitals that low, still conscious and talking. Said it takes a special kind of stubborn to survive what he survived. "Special forces stubborn," Torres added. He pulled out his phone again, showing them something new. "I did some more research. Found his unit citation. Found names of men he served with." He scrolled through a list. 3 of them live within 50 miles of here. "I already called them. They're on their way." Emilia felt something crack in her chest. His brothers. The ones who would understand in ways she never could. The ones who knew the man he had been before everything broke. The door opened again, and this time it was a woman in her 60s, her dark hair streaked with gray, her face lined but still beautiful. She stopped in the doorway, her eyes finding Emily, and the resemblance was so strong that everyone in the room knew immediately who she was. "Mama," Emily said, standing. She crossed to the woman, and they embraced, both of them crying. Elena Martinez held her daughter tight, then pulled back to look at the others. "Where's he?" she asked. "Where's the man who was with my Carlos?" "In surgery," Emilia said. She stood, feeling like she should introduce herself but not knowing what to say. Her father had carried this woman's husband for 32 years. had carried the guilt of not saving him through homelessness and grief and a slow drowning in memories. Elena's eyes found Emilia's face, and something shifted in her expression. "You're his daughter," she said. It wasn't a question. "You have his eyes. The same ones I saw in that photograph at the White House." Emilia nodded. "Emilia Castellano." Elena crossed to her, took both of her hands. "Your father saved 24 men that day. My Carlos died, but 24 other women got their husbands back. 24 children got their fathers." She squeezed Emilia's hands. "I spent 32 years wanting to thank him, wanted to tell him that I never blamed him, that Carlos knew what he was doing, that he died doing what he loved with someone who cared about him." Emilia's tears came hard and fast. "He's been homeless for 4 years because he thinks he failed everyone. He thinks he deserves to suffer." Elena's face hardened with determination. "Then we will tell him different. When he wakes up, we will all tell him different." The waiting room filled slowly over the next hour. First came 3 men in their 50s, all of them moving with the same bearing as Torres. They introduced themselves with rank and unit. Master Sergeant Frank Palmer, Sergeant First Class David Chun, Staff Sergeant Marcus Williams. All of them had served with Raymond. All of them had heard he was missing, homeless, lost. All of them had been looking. They sat down with Torres, with Emilia, with Emily and Elena, and they talked. They told stories about a man Emilia barely recognized, about Ghost, the medic who could move through hostile territory without making a sound, about the sergeant who trained new medics with patience and precision, about the friend who remembered everyone's birthday, who sent care packages home for his team's families, who never left anyone behind. "He saved my life in Kandahar," Palmer said. "I took shrapnel to the leg, severed artery, and he ran 200 meters under fire to get to me. Stopped the bleeding in 45 seconds. He looked at Emilia. "Your father is the reason I got to see my kids grow up. He trained me," Chun said. "Taught me everything I know about battlefield medicine. Told me once that the most important thing wasn't the technical skill. It was staying calm when everything was chaos. Being the steady hand when everyone else was falling apart." Williams was quieter. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "After Carlos died, Ghost changed. He blamed himself. Stopped sleeping. Stopped eating. We tried to help, but he shut us out. Said he didn't deserve to keep breathing when Carlos didn't. We thought he was getting better after he retired. Got married, had a kid, seemed happy. But then when his wife died, he shook his head. We should have looked harder. Should have found him sooner. You found him now," Elena said. "That's what matters. And when he wakes up, he needs to see that he's not alone. That he never was." Sarah appeared in the doorway again. This time her smile was real. "He's out of surgery. McAllister says it was touch and go, but he pulled through. They're moving him to recovery now." The room erupted in relief. Emilia felt her knees go weak, felt Emily's arm around her shoulders holding her up. Elena was crying again, but this time with joy mixed with the grief. "He's going to be sedated for a while," Sarah continued. "But you can see him once he's settled. 2 at a time, in recovery. Family first." Emilia looked at Emily, at Elena, at the 3 sergeants who had served with her father, at Torres who had recognized something in a broken man that others had dismissed. "We're all family," she said. "However long it takes, we all need to be there when he wakes up. We all need to tell him he's not alone anymore." And so they waited, in that blue vinyl room that felt a little less like a cage now. Waited for a man who had carried too much for too long to finally wake up and discover that the weight he had been carrying alone could be shared. That the ghosts he had been talking to had living voices willing to answer back. That surviving wasn't a betrayal. That coming home was still possible, even after 4 years in the wilderness. Even after believing he deserved nothing but the cold and the dark. Even then, especially then, Raymond drifted in the gray space between consciousness and sleep, where morphine softened the edges of reality and memories became indistinguishable from dreams. He could hear voices, distant and muffled, but couldn't make out words. Could feel pressure on his hand, but couldn't tell if it was real or another ghost reaching back. The pain was there, dull and deep in his abdomen where they had cut him open to stop the bleeding, but it felt far away. Manageable. Nothing compared to the pain of carrying Carlos for 32 years. Nothing compared to the pain of walking away from his daughter 4 years ago. Nothing compared to the pain of waking up every morning under a bridge and wondering why he was still breathing when so many better people weren't. In the dream, Jennifer was there, sitting beside him the way she had during his nightmares after deployment. Her hand cool on his forehead, her voice soft and steady. "Ray," she was saying, "it's time to stop running." "I don't know how," he heard himself answer. "I don't know how to stop seeing them. Carlos bleeding out. You in that hospital bed. Emilia's face when I told her I was leaving." "You start by opening your eyes," Jennifer said. "You start by letting the people who love you help carry what you've been carrying alone." "But I don't deserve it," Raymond whispered. "I failed them. Failed you. Failed everyone." Jennifer's laugh was the sound he missed most in the world. "Deserving has nothing to do with it, sweetheart. Love isn't about deserving. It's about showing up. And there are people here who showed up for you. The least you could do is wake up and let them." The dream began to fade, and Raymond felt himself being pulled toward consciousness. Felt the weight of his body in the hospital bed. Felt the ache in his surgical incisions. Felt the pressure on his hand that he now recognized as real. Someone holding on. Someone refusing to let go. His eyes opened slowly, the recovery room coming into focus in fragments. White ceiling tiles. Fluorescent lights dimmed low. Monitors beeping steadily. And beside his bed, her hand wrapped around his, was his daughter. Emilia's eyes were closed, her head resting on the edge of his bed, her breathing slow and even. She had fallen asleep waiting for him. 4 years of searching, and she had fallen asleep holding his hand like she used to do when she was small and had nightmares. Raymond's throat was dry, his voice barely a whisper when he tried to speak. He managed. The name came out broken. Emilia's eyes flew open. She sat up so fast she nearly knocked over the four-pole. "Dad." "Well, thank God." She squeezed his hand tighter, tears already streaming down her face. "You're awake. You're really awake." Raymond tried to pull his hand away, tried to turn his face from her, but he was too weak and she was too determined. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry. You shouldn't be here. You should be living your life, not sitting in a hospital with my father," Emilia interrupted. "With the man who raised me, who taught me to ride a bike and helped me with homework and came to every single one of my soccer games, even when he was exhausted from double shifts at the VA clinic." She wiped her eyes, but the tears kept coming. "You think 4 years erases 28 years. You think walking away means I stop being your daughter." Raymond's own tears started, hot and ashamed. "After your mother died, I couldn't. I couldn't be what you needed. I couldn't look at you without seeing her, without seeing everyone I'd lost. So you decided to lose me too," Emilia said. Her voice was steady, but underneath it was steel and hurt and 4 years of wondering if her father was dead in a ditch somewhere. "You decided that was easier than letting me help you grieve." "It wasn't easier," Raymond said. "Nothing about the last 4 years has been easy. Every day, I wanted to come back. Every day, I watched you from a distance, made sure you were okay. But I thought you were better off without me, without my broken pieces dragging you down." "That wasn't your choice to make," Emilia said. She reached up and turned his face toward hers, making him look at her. "I needed my father, not a perfect version, not someone who had it all together. Just you, broken pieces and all." The door to the recovery room opened, and Sarah looked in. "More visitors are here," she said gently. "Are you up for it?" Raymond started to shake his head, but Emilia spoke first. "He's up for it." She looked at her father. "There are people here who need to see you. People who have been waiting a long time." Sarah opened the door wider, and Elena Martinez walked in. She was older than the photograph Carlos had carried, older than the young widow at the White House ceremony. But her eyes were the same, kind, strong, filled with a grief that had softened over 32 years but never disappeared. She stopped at the foot of the bed and for a long moment just looked at Raymond. He couldn't meet her eyes, couldn't face the widow of the man he had failed to save. "Sergeant Castellano," Elena said. Her voice was quiet, but it filled the room. "Mom," Raymond whispered. I'm sorry. I tried to save him. I tried everything I knew, but it wasn't enough. I'm so sorry. Elena moved to the side of the bed opposite Emilia. She reached out and took Raymond's free hand in both of hers. I know you tried, she said. I have known that for 32 years. Carlos knew it too. His last words were about you. About how it wasn't your fault. Raymond's breath caught. How do you know his last words? Because Emily told me, Elena said. Because our daughter was in the ER tonight. Because she was there when you woke up the first time and told her what her father said. What do you want her to know? Emily Rodriguez appeared in the doorway, still in her medical student scrubs. She crossed to stand beside her mother. You kept your promise, she said to Raymond. You told me about my father. You gave me his last words. And I need you to understand something. She pulled the combat medic badge from her pocket, the one Raymond had carried for 32 years. This belongs to you now. You've carried it long enough. You've carried him long enough. I can't, Raymond started. Yes, you can, Elena said firmly. You can, and you will. Because Carlos would be furious if he knew you spent 32 years drowning in guilt over something that wasn't your fault. She squeezed his hand. You saved 24 men that day. 24 families got their soldiers back because of you. That's not failure. That's heroism. The door opened again, and Torres came in, followed by Palmer, Chun, and Williams. All of them in civilian clothes now, but still moving with that unmistakable bearing. They stood at the foot of the bed, not quite at attention, but close. Ghost, Palmer said. The call sign Raymond hadn't heard in years. It's good to see you, brother. Raymond looked at them, at the men he had served with, at the men who had called and emailed and looked for him after he disappeared. We looked for you, Chin said. After Jennifer died. After you left. We looked everywhere. I didn't want to be found, Raymond whispered. I wanted to disappear. To stop being a burden. William stepped forward. His voice was rough. You saved my life. You saved all our lives at one point or another. And you think you're a burden. You think we wouldn't move heaven and earth to help you the way you helped us. Sarah appeared in the doorway again. I hate to interrupt, she said, but there's one more person who needs to see him. She stepped aside and a man in scrubs walked in. Late 50s, graying hair, surgeon's hands. Dr. James McAllister. Sergeant Castellano, McAllister said. He moved to the bedside. I served too. Army surgeon. Iraq and Afghanistan. And I have to tell you, I've been a trauma surgeon for 30 years, and I've never seen anyone survive what you survived tonight. He gestured to Raymond's abdomen. Ruptured spleen, massive infection, severe malnutrition, and you were still conscious when they brought you in. Still talking. Still fighting. Wasn't trying to fight, Raymond said. Was trying to die quietly. Well, you failed at that too, McAllister said with a slight smile. Because you're going to live. You're going to recover. And you're going to let these people help you. That's an order. Raymond looked around the recovery room. At his daughter holding his hand. At Elena and Emily standing together. At his brothers from the service. At Torres and Sarah and McAllister. At all these people who somehow still saw something worth saving. I don't know how to stop carrying them. He whispered. I don't know how to let go. You don't let go, Emilia said softly. You just stop carrying them alone. The hospital room was quiet except for the steady beep of monitors and the soft sound of breathing. Raymond had been moved from recovery to a private room, something Sarah had arranged personally, and now he sat propped up in bed with pillows behind him, looking more alert but also more fragile, as if being awake meant facing things he had been running from for 4 years. Emilia sat in the chair closest to his bed, her hand still holding his, refusing to let go even when the nurses came to check vitals or adjust medications. Elena and Emily had stepped out to get coffee, giving father and daughter time alone, but Raymond knew they would be back. Knew that the circle of people who refused to let him disappear had only grown larger. I need to tell you something, Raymond said finally. His voice was stronger now, though still rough. About the last 4 years. About why I stayed away. Emilia squeezed his hand. You don't have to explain. Yes, I do, Raymond said. Because you deserve to know. You deserve to understand that it wasn't about you. It was never about you. He took a breath, feeling the pull of surgical stitches. After your mother died, I stopped sleeping, stopped eating. I would lie in bed, and all I could see was her face in that hospital. All I could hear was her voice asking me not to leave her. And I couldn't save her. Just like I couldn't save Carlos. Just like I couldn't save the 6 who died in Mogadishu despite everything I tried. Dad, Amelia started, but Raymond kept talking. And then I would see you, he said. And you looked so much like her. Same eyes. Same smile. And every time I looked at you, I saw her dying all over again. I saw my failure. I saw proof that I couldn't protect the people I loved. He wiped his eyes with his free hand. So I left. I told myself you were better off without me. That you would move on and be happy, and I wouldn't drag you down with my broken pieces. Amelia's tears fell silently. I wasn't better off. I was terrified. I thought you were dead. Every time the phone rang, I thought it would be someone calling to identify a body. I know, Raymond whispered. And I'm sorry. I watched you from a distance. Made sure you were okay. But I couldn't let myself come back. Couldn't let myself believe I deserved to be your father after I had abandoned you. The door opened and Torres walked in, followed by Palmer, Chun, and Williams. They had brought someone new, a man in his 70s, wearing a baseball cap with Vietnam veteran embroidered across the front. He moved slowly, using a cane, but his eyes were sharp and clear. Ghost, the old man said. His voice was gravelly but warm. Heard you finally came in from the cold. Raymond's eyes widened. Sergeant Major Harrison. Sir. He tried to sit up straighter, old habits kicking in even through pain and exhaustion. Harrison waved him down. At ease, son. I'm retired. Have been for 20 years. But when these young men called me and said they'd found you, I had to come see for myself. He moved to the bedside, leaning on his cane. You train under me. Best combat medic I ever saw. And the most stubborn. Sir, Raymond started. You disappeared, Harrison interrupted. After your wife died, we all looked for you, called in favors, checked hospitals and shelters. But you didn't want to be found. He shook his head. Thought we taught you better than that. Thought you understood that soldiers don't leave their brothers behind. Raymond felt the words hit like physical blows. I wasn't a soldier anymore. I was just a broken man who couldn't face his failures. Harrison's voice hardened. You were a Medal of Honor recipient. You were a father. You were a brother to every man who served with you. And you decided none of that mattered because you were hurting. He leaned closer. Son, I've been where you are. Vietnam broke me the same way Somalia broke you. Came home and couldn't adjust. Couldn't sleep. Couldn't look at my family without seeing the faces of the men I'd lost. You know what saved me? What? Raymond whispered. Accepting that I couldn't carry it alone, Harrison said. Accepting that asking for help wasn't weakness. That surviving wasn't betrayal. That the best way to honor the dead was to live for them. To be the man they believed I could be. Palmer stepped forward. We should have done more. After Carlos died, after we saw you falling apart, we should have pulled you out before it got this bad. You tried, Raymond said. I shut you out. Told you I was fine. Lied to everyone, including myself. Chin pulled something from his pocket. A photograph. Old and creased from being carried. It showed a group of men in desert camouflage, arms around each other's shoulders, smiling despite the dust and heat. Raymond recognized himself in the photo. Younger, unbroken, standing between Carlos and Palmer. We've all carried this, Chun said. Every one of us. Carried the memory of what we were. Who we were together. He handed the photo to Raymond. You're in every one of our wallets. Every one of our homes. You think we'd forget you. You think we'd stop looking. William spoke next, his voice thick. My daughter is alive because of you. Kandahar, 2006. I took that shrapnel and you ran through enemy fire to get to me. Stopped the bleeding in less than a minute. Got me to the evac bird. She graduated college last year. Started her own business. And every single day, I thank God you were there. Raymond stared at the photograph, at the faces of men who were mostly still alive because of split-second decisions he had made under fire. Decisions that had saved them, but hadn't saved Carlos. Hadn't saved Jennifer. Hadn't saved the 6 who died, despite his best efforts. I don't know how to forgive myself, he said quietly. I don't know how to live with the weight of everyone I couldn't save. You start by living with everyone you did save, Harrison said. You start by accepting that you're human, that you did your best, that sometimes best isn't enough, and that's not a failure of character. It's just the reality of a broken world. The door opened again, and Patricia Wells walked in, still in her Navy suit despite the late hour. She carried a folder, and her expression was serious. "Sergeant Castellano," she said, "I want to speak with you about what happened in our emergency room tonight." Raymond's jaw tightened. "Ma'am, whatever disciplinary action you need to take against Dr. Brennan, I don't want to press charges. I don't want to ruin his career." Wells's expression softened slightly. "That's generous of you. But Dr. Brennan's career decisions are between him and the medical board. What I came to tell you is that this hospital failed you tonight. We failed to provide the standard of care we promise every patient. And for that, I apologize." She opened the folder, pulled out a document. "I've also been informed by several veteran organizations that you're eligible for benefits you haven't been accessing. Bas-Felisker, housing assistance, mental health services specifically designed for combat veterans dealing with PTSD and survivor's guilt." "I went to the VA," Raymond said, "for years ago, after Jennifer died. The waiting list was 6 months. The paperwork got lost 3 times. The system wasn't designed for someone like me." "The system failed you," Wells said firmly. "But there are people who can help navigate it. People who specialize in getting veterans the care they've earned." She placed the folder on the bedside table. "Sarah Chun has compiled resources, programs at work, people who care, and your daughter has already started making calls." Amelia nodded. "You're not going back to the streets, Dad. You're coming home with me, and we're going to get you the help you need. Real help, not bureaucracy, not waiting lists. Actual care." Raymond looked around the room, at his daughter, at his brothers from the service, at Harrison, who had walked the same dark road and found his way back, at Torres standing quietly by the door, a Desert Storm veteran who had recognized something in a broken man that others had dismissed, at Wells, who was trying to make right a wrong that never should have happened. "I don't deserve this," he whispered. Every person in that room spoke at once. "Yes, you do." And for the first time in 4 years, Raymond let himself believe they might be right. 3 days had passed since the surgery. 3 days of slowly healing, of accepting visitors, of beginning to believe that maybe the world had room for him, after all. Raymond sat in his hospital bed, dressed in clean clothes that Amelia had brought from home, his hair washed and trimmed by a volunteer barber who worked with homeless veterans. He looked more like the man in the White House photograph now. Older, scarred, but recognizably human again. The room was full. Amelia sat on one side of his bed, Elena and Emily on the other. Torres stood by the window in dress uniform, having taken personal time to be here. Palmer, Chun, and Williams lined the wall, also in uniform. Harrison sat in the chair closest to the door, his cane resting against his knee. Sarah stood near the medical equipment, officially on duty but refusing to leave. Patricia Wells had called a press conference, not because Raymond wanted one, but because the story had leaked. Videos from the emergency room, medical students posting about what they had witnessed, social media erupting with outrage over how a Medal of Honor recipient had been treated. The hospital was being crucified in the court of public opinion, and Wells had decided the best response was transparency and accountability. Raymond hadn't wanted any of it. Hadn't wanted cameras or reporters or his shame broadcast to the world. But Amelia had convinced him, not for himself, but for the thousands of other homeless veterans who were dismissed every day, who were looked at and seen as drains on the system instead of people who had sacrificed everything. The conference was being held in a room down the hall. Raymond could hear the murmur of voices, the clicking of cameras being set up. His hands trembled slightly, and Amelia covered them with her own. "You don't have to do this," she said quietly. "We can still cancel." "No," Raymond said. His voice was stronger than it had been 3 days ago. "If my story can help even one veteran get the care they need, then it's worth it." He looked at Elena. "Worth it for Carlos. For all the brothers who came home broken and got left behind by the system they served." Elena squeezed his other hand. "Carlos will be proud of you. For surviving. For fighting. For finally letting people help." A young woman in hospital administration colors appeared in the doorway. "They're ready for you," she said. Torres moved to the wheelchair that had been brought for Raymond. "The surgeon says you can sit for 30 minutes max," he said. "Any longer, and you risk tearing your stitches. So we keep this brief." Raymond nodded and let Torres help him into the wheelchair. Emilia walked beside him as they moved down the hallway, the others following in formation. When they reached the conference room, Raymond could see it was packed. Reporters with cameras and microphones, hospital board members, and in the back, half a dozen veterans in various states of homelessness, brought here by outreach workers who had heard the story and wanted them to see that someone was finally paying attention. The room quieted as Raymond was wheeled to the front. Patricia Wells stood at a podium, her expression professional, but Raymond could see the anger underneath. Anger at her own institution. Anger at the system that had failed him and thousands like him. "Thank you all for coming," Wells began. 3 days ago, a man came to our emergency room in critical condition. He was homeless. He was in pain. He was dying. And our staff, specifically Dr. Mitchell Brennan, made assumptions based on appearance rather than providing the standard of care we promise every patient. She gestured to Raymond. "This is Sergeant Raymond Castellano, United States Army Special Forces, Medal of Honor recipient, combat medic who saved 24 lives during the Battle of Mogadishu in 1993. A man who served his country with distinction for over 20 years. And we almost let him die in our emergency room because one doctor couldn't see past his prejudice." The cameras flashed. Reporters leaned forward. Raymond felt Emilia's hand on his shoulder, grounding him. Wells continued. "Dr. Brennan has been terminated. We are implementing new protocols for homeless patient intake. We are partnering with veteran outreach organizations to ensure this never happens again. But most importantly, we are here to listen to Sergeant Castellano's story, to understand how a decorated war hero ended up homeless, to understand what failures in our society, in our systems, led to this moment." She stepped back and looked at Raymond. "Sergeant, if you're willing to share." Raymond took a breath, looked at the cameras, at the reporters, at the homeless veterans in the back who were watching him with eyes that understood. He thought about running, about wheeling himself out of this room and disappearing again. But then he felt Emilia's hand, felt Elena's presence, felt his brothers standing behind him. "My name is Raymond Castellano," he said. His voice was quiet, but in the silence of the room it carried. "Call sign Ghost. I served with Special Forces for 22 years. 3 combat tours. Iraq, Afghanistan, Somalia. I was a combat medic. My job was to save lives under fire." He paused, gathered himself. "October 3rd, 1993. Mogadishu, Somalia. Black Hawk Down. My unit was tasked with extracting wounded from 2 crashed helicopters. I was assigned to Super 6-1 with my partner, Corporal Carlos Martinez." He gestured to Emily and Elena. "His wife and daughter are here today." The room was absolutely silent now. Raymond could see some of the reporters checking their phones, pulling up information about the Battle of Mogadishu, realizing the significance. "We held that crash site for 18 hours, Raymond continued, under constant fire from hundreds of militia. I treated 24 wounded soldiers that day, stopped arterial bleeding, performed field surgery, did everything I was trained to do." He felt his voice catch. "But I couldn't save Carlos. He took a sniper round meant for me, severed his subclavian artery. I held pressure for 90 seconds, but the bleeding wouldn't stop. He died in my arms." Emily was crying now. Elena held her daughter close, but her eyes were on Raymond, steady and strong. "I carried that guilt for 32 years, Raymond said. Carried it through the rest of my service, through retirement, through marriage and fatherhood. And I managed. I thought I was managing. Then my wife, Jennifer, died of cancer. And something in me broke that no amount of training or discipline could fix." He looked at Emilia. "I left my daughter, abandoned her because I couldn't face my own pain. Couldn't look at her without seeing everyone I'd lost. I spent 4 years homeless. For years believing I deserved nothing but the cold and the streets and the weight of my failures." One of the reporters raised a hand. "Sergeant Castellano, you were awarded the Medal of Honor for your actions in Mogadishu. You saved 24 men. How did you end up believing you were a failure?" Raymond smiled sadly. "Because medals don't stop nightmares. Awards don't bring back the dead. And when you spent 32 years second-guessing every decision you made in 90 seconds, Eventually, you start believing that the only reason you survived was because you didn't deserve to die, that you should have been the one who took that bullet, that your survival was a mistake. The room was silent. Some of the reporters had stopped taking notes. They were just listening. What changed? Another reporter asked. Why come to the hospital? Why now? Raymond looked at Torres. Because a security guard saw me as a person instead of a problem. He looked at Sarah. Because a nurse treated me with dignity when a doctor saw me as a drain on resources. He looked at Amelia. Because my daughter never stopped searching, never stopped believing I was worth saving. He looked at the homeless veterans in the back. And I'm here because there are thousands of veterans on the streets right now who are being dismissed the same way I was, who are carrying the same weight I carried, who believe the same lies I believed, that they don't deserve help, that they're burdens, that they should just disappear. His voice grew stronger. We served our country. We carried weapons into combat. We held the line when others couldn't. And when we came home broken, the system that sent us to war abandoned us. That's not acceptable. That's not honorable. That's not the country we fought for. The room erupted. Questions shouting from all directions. But Raymond raised his hand, and the room quieted again. I don't want sympathy, he said. I want change. I want every emergency room to see veterans as people first. I want VA wait times shortened. I want mental health services that actually help instead of just checking boxes. I want homeless outreach that treats people with dignity. And I want other veterans to know that surviving isn't betrayal, that asking for help isn't weakness, that you deserve to live even when the weight makes you want to stop. He looked directly at the camera. To every veteran watching this who's struggling, who's on the streets or close to it, who believes they're alone. You're not. There are people who care, people who will help. You just have to let them. Please, let them. The press conference dissolved into chaos after that. Reporters shouting questions, cameras flashing. But Raymond was done. Torres wheeled him out, back to his room, back to safety. And as they left, Raymond saw the homeless veterans in the back, standing at attention. Hands over hearts, tears streaming down weathered faces, seeing themselves in his story, seeing hope where before there had been only darkness. The press conference footage went viral within hours. By the next morning, Raymond's story was on every major news network. Clips of his testimony, photos comparing the young soldier at the White House ceremony to the homeless man who had collapsed at the ER entrance. Interviews with the medical students who had witnessed Brennan's dismissal. Torres talking about recognizing a fellow veteran. Sarah describing the moment she found the Medal of Honor citation in his wallet. But what captured the most attention was a single moment. When Raymond had looked directly into the camera and said, to every veteran watching this who's struggling, you're not alone. That 10-second clip played on loop across social media. Veterans sharing it. Families of veterans sharing it. Advocacy groups amplifying it. Within 48 hours, it had been viewed over 20 million times. Raymond sat in his hospital bed, discharge papers signed, waiting for Amelia to bring the car around. The surgical team had cleared him to go home with strict instructions about rest, medication, and follow-up appointments. But home meant something different now than it had a week ago. Home meant Amelia's guest room. Home meant family dinners and physical therapy appointments, and slowly rebuilding what he had burned down 4 years earlier. There was a knock on the door, and Patricia Wells walked in, followed by a man in a dark suit carrying a briefcase. The man was in his 50s, distinguished looking, with silver hair and the bearing of someone who had worn a uniform once. Sergeant Castellano, Wells said. This is Marcus Webb. He's the director of the Wounded Warrior Advocacy Foundation. He wanted to meet you before you left. Webb extended his hand, and Raymond shook it, feeling the firmness of another veteran's grip. Sergeant, it's an honor. I'm a Marine, retired colonel. 2 tours in Iraq. I started the foundation because I saw too many of my Marines come home and fall through the cracks. Raymond nodded. Seen it too many times myself. Webb sat down. Your press conference has created a firestorm. In a good way. We've had over 5,000 calls to our veteran crisis line in the last 48 hours. Veterans who watched your speech and decided to reach out for help instead of suffering alone. You've saved more lives in 2 days than most people save in a lifetime. Raymond felt the weight of that. 5,000. 5,000 veterans who might have ended up like him. Or worse. I just told the truth. And the truth has power, Webb said. Which is why I'm here. We want to partner with you. Not exploit you. Not use you as a poster child. But work with you to create real change. You talked about VA wait times. About mental health services. About homeless outreach. We have the resources and the political connections to make those things happen. But we need a voice that people will listen to. A face that represents what's at stake. Raymond looked at his hands. The surgical scars from decades of field medicine. The tremor that came from 4 years of malnutrition and exposure. I'm not a spokesperson. I'm just a broken medic who got lucky. You're a Medal of Honor recipient who survived hell twice, Webb said. Once in Mogadishu and once on the streets. And you're still here. Still fighting. That's not luck. That's strength. And we need that strength to fight for the ones who can't fight for themselves anymore. Before Raymond could respond, the door opened again. This time, it was a different kind of delegation. 5 veterans, all of them clearly homeless based on their worn clothes and weathered faces. Torres stood behind them, having escorted them up from the lobby. The leader of the group stepped forward, a man in his 60s with a gray beard and eyes that had seen too much. Sir, my name is Daniel Price. Army Infantry. Glufa. I've been on the streets for 8 years. He gestured to the others. We all have. And we watched your press conference. Watched you tell our story. Say the things we've been too ashamed to say. Raymond felt his throat tighten. I'm sorry it took me so long to speak up. You spoke up when it mattered, Price said. And we wanted you to know that you're not alone either. We're forming a veteran advocacy group. Peer support. Outreach. Helping each other navigate the system. And we wanted to ask if you'd be willing to help us. Not lead us. We don't need a leader. But stand with us. Be part of something bigger. Raymond looked at these men, saw himself in their faces, saw Carlos in their eyes, saw every brother he had ever served with who had come home and struggled to find their place in a world that didn't understand what they carried. Yes, he said simply, whatever you need. I'm in. Price's weathered face broke into a smile. Thank you, sir. He pulled something from his pocket, a challenge coin, worn and scratched from years of being carried. This was given to me by my sergeant in Desert Storm. Told me to carry it as a reminder that I was never alone. That my brothers had my back. I want you to have it now. Raymond took the coin, felt the weight of it. I can't take this. It's yours. It's ours, Price corrected. All of us. That's what we're building here. A brotherhood that doesn't end when a uniform comes off. He looked at the other veterans with him. We take care of our own. Starting now. Starting with each other. The door opened again, and this time it was a crowd. Emily and Elena carrying flowers. Palmer, Chun, and Williams in civilian clothes. Harrison moving slowly with his cane. Sarah wheeling in a cart with a cake that said welcome home. Torres carrying wrapped packages. What is all this? Raymond asked, overwhelmed. Emilia appeared in the doorway, grinning. This is your going home party. Because you're not sneaking out of here quietly. You're leaving with everyone who loves you, making sure you know you're not alone. The small hospital room filled with people, with laughter and tears and stories. Palmer recounting the time Raymond had stayed up all night helping him write letters home to his kids. Chun describing how Raymond had trained him to stay calm under fire by making him recite recipes while treating mock casualties. Williams showing everyone the scar on his leg where Raymond had stopped the bleeding that saved his life. Harrison stood and tapped his cane against the floor for attention. I have something to say. He looked at Raymond. I trained you 35 years ago. Watched you become the best combat medic I'd ever seen. Watched you save lives that should have been lost. And then I watched you disappear, and it broke my heart. He paused, his voice thick with emotion. But I'm watching you come back now. And that heals something I didn't know was still wounded. Elena stepped forward, holding Emily's hand. Carlos used to tell me about his medic. About Ghost. About the man who could move through hostile territory like smoke and treat wounds with hands that never shook no matter how bad the fighting got. She looked at Raymond. He loved you like a brother. And I need you to know that I never blamed you for his death. I blamed the war. I blamed the circumstances. But never you. Raymond's tears fell freely now. He had spent 32 years imagining this conversation, imagining Elena's anger, her accusation, her righteous fury, and instead she was offering forgiveness he hadn't earned, grace he didn't deserve. Emily crossed to him and placed the combat medic badge in his hand. You carried this for 32 years, carried my father's memory, but now it's time to let us carry some of that weight with you. She closed his fingers around the badge. You're not alone anymore, Raymond. None of us are. Amelia stood beside him, her hand on his shoulder. Mom will be so proud of you right now. Not because you're some hero in the news, but because you finally stopped running. Because you let people love you again. Torres stepped forward, his security guard uniform somehow looking more military than most dress blues. You saved my life too, you know. He saw Raymond's confusion. Not in combat, but 3 nights ago when I saw you collapse. Why I decided to help instead of calling it in and walking away. I've been wrestling with my own demons from Desert Storm. Watching you fight inspired me to finally make an appointment at the VA, to stop pretending I was fine. Sarah handed Raymond a card, my personal number, and the number for the Veteran Crisis Line, and numbers for 3 different support groups. Because you're going to have hard days. Days when the weight feels too heavy again. And I want you to promise me you'll call instead of running. Raymond looked at the card, at all the numbers representing lifelines he had refused to grab for 4 years. I promise. Webb stood again. We're launching the Castellano Initiative next month. Named after you. Dedicated to reducing veteran homelessness and improving mental health access. Senator Morrison is already on board. We have bipartisan support. We have funding. And we have momentum because you had the courage to tell your story. The room erupted in applause. Raymond sat there, surrounded by more love than he had felt in 4 years. More connection, more purpose. And for the first time since Jennifer died, he felt something he thought he'd lost forever. Hope. Not the naive hope of someone who hadn't seen darkness, but the earned hope of someone who had walked through hell and discovered that on the other side, people were waiting. People who cared. People who refused to let him disappear into the shadows again. The weight was still there. Carlos, Jennifer, the 6 who died in Mogadishu, the ones he couldn't save. But now he wasn't carrying it alone. Now there were hands reaching out, voices saying we've got you, hearts insisting you matter. Amelia wheeled him toward the door, the entire group following like an honor guard. As they passed through the hallway, hospital staff lined up. Doctors, nurses, technicians, patients in wheelchairs and beds, all of them applauding. And standing at the end of the hallway, separated from the crowd, was Mitchell Brennan. He looked smaller somehow, diminished, his white coat gone, his arrogance stripped away. When he saw Raymond, he stepped forward. Sergeant Castellano, Brennan said quietly, I know I have no right to ask, but I wanted to apologize, face to face, for my prejudice, my assumptions, my failure to see you as a human being. Raymond looked at the man who had called him a drain on society, who had mocked his service, who had denied him care, and he felt no anger, just sadness for someone who had let fear and pride blind him to the humanity right in front of him. I forgive you, Raymond said simply. Brennan's face crumpled. How can you? After what I did. Because holding on to anger would make me the person you thought I was, Raymond said. And I'm trying to be the person my brothers believed I could be. And with that, Amelia pushed the wheelchair forward, out of the hospital, into the sunlight, into whatever came next. Still here, Raymond whispered to the sky, to Carlos, to Jennifer, to everyone he carried. Still trying, but this time not alone. 2 weeks after leaving the hospital, Raymond stood in Amelia's guest room and barely recognized the man in the mirror. Clean-shaven, hair trimmed, clothes that fit properly and smelled like laundry detergent instead of the street. His surgical incisions were healing well according to the follow-up appointments. His body was slowly remembering what it felt like to be fed regularly, to sleep in a bed, to be warm and safe. But the real healing was harder to see. The nightmares still came most nights. He would wake up with Carlos's name on his lips, with a phantom sensation of blood on his hands. But now when he woke, Amelia was there. Or he could call Sarah. Or he could text the veteran support group that had formed in the aftermath of the press conference. He wasn't alone with the ghosts anymore. "Dad," Emilia called from downstairs. "Are you ready?" "They're here." Raymond took a breath and headed down. In the living room, Emily Rodriguez and Elena Martinez waited, both of them dressed for the occasion. Today was important. Today was the dedication ceremony at the new Veteran Center, funded by donations that had poured in after Raymond's story went viral. Today was also something else. Something Raymond had been preparing for, but still terrified him. "You look good," Elena said, smiling. "Carlos would be proud to see you like this." Raymond felt the familiar tightness in his chest, but he pushed through it. "I've been wanting to talk to you both about something I should have done years ago." He pulled an envelope from his pocket. "After Carlos died, after I got home, the Army gave me his personal effects. Letters, photos, his wedding ring. I couldn't bring myself to reach out. Couldn't face you. So I kept them. Carried them for 32 years. Elena's hand went to her mouth. "His letters." Raymond handed her the envelope. "Everything, including letters he wrote to Emilia, but never got to send. Letters about wanting to take her to Disneyland. About teaching her to ride a bike. About all the things he dreamed of doing when he came home." Emily started crying immediately. Elena opened the envelope with trembling hands, pulling out a stack of letters written in Carlos's precise handwriting. The first one was addressed to Emilia, "My little princess." The date was 3 days before he died. "He wanted you to have these," Raymond said. "I'm sorry it took me so long to give them to you. I'm sorry for so many things." Elena looked up, tears streaming down her face. "You carried these for 32 years. Kept them safe. Kept them alive in your memory." She crossed to Raymond and embraced him. "Thank you. Thank you for holding on to him when I thought everything was lost." Emily joined the embrace, the three of them standing together in Emilia's living room, connected by a man who had died decades ago, but whose love still echoed forward. When they finally separated, Elena wiped her eyes and smiled. "Carlos would want us at this dedication, would want us to see what good came from his sacrifice." The Veteran Center was in a converted warehouse downtown. Outside, a crowd had gathered. News cameras, local politicians, and hundreds of veterans, some in uniform, many in street clothes, quite a few clearly homeless. Raymond recognized Daniel Price and the other veterans who had visited him in the hospital. They stood in formation near the entrance, holding signs that read "Veterans, helping veterans, and no one left behind." Torres was there in his security uniform, having taken the day off to attend. Sarah stood with a group of nurses from the hospital, all of them wearing pins that said "See the person." Palmer, Chun, and Williams had driven in from out of state. Harrison sat in a wheelchair now, his health declining, but his eyes were sharp and clear. As Raymond walked toward the entrance, the crowd began to applaud. Not the polite applause of a formal ceremony, but the thunderous recognition of people who understood what this moment meant. Veterans saluting, families crying, homeless individuals standing straighter, seeing themselves reflected in Raymond's journey from the streets to this stage. Marcus Webb met him at the entrance. "Ready for this, Sergeant?" Raymond looked at the building, at the sign above the door that read the Castellano Center for Veteran Services, at his own name attached to something that would help thousands. "No, but I'm going to do it anyway." Webb smiled. "That's the most honest answer I've ever heard. Come on, there are people waiting to meet you." Inside, the center was beautiful, clean, warm, designed with input from veterans to feel safe and welcoming. There were offices for case workers who specialized in navigating VA bureaucracy, a medical clinic staffed by doctors who understood combat trauma, group therapy rooms, a kitchen where veterans could learn job skills, and upstairs, 20 beds for homeless veterans who needed a safe place to stay while they got back on their feet. In the main room, a small stage had been set up. Senator Morrison waited there, along with the mayor and several veterans who had been chosen to speak. But Raymond's attention was drawn to something else. A wall covered in photographs. The memorial wall. Pictures of fallen soldiers from every conflict. And right in the center, a photograph of Carlos Martinez in his dress uniform, smiling at the camera. Below Carlos's photo was a plaque. "Corporal Carlos Martinez, United States Army." Killed in action, Mogadishu, Somalia, October 3rd, 1993. He died saving his brothers. This center stands in his memory and in honor of all who served. Raymond stood in front of the photo, feeling Emilia's hand slip into his. Elena and Emily stood on his other side. The four of them looking at the face of a man who connected them all. He would have loved this, Elena said softly. Would have been here every day, helping other veterans. That was who he was. The ceremony began. Senator Morrison spoke about the importance of veteran services and the failures of the current system. The mayor talked about the city's commitment to ending veteran homelessness. Marcus Webb explained the mission of the center and the Castellano initiative that would replicate this model in cities across the country. Then it was Raymond's turn. He walked to the microphone, his legs steadier than they had been 2 weeks ago, but still not quite right. The room fell silent. Hundreds of faces looking at him, expecting inspiration, expecting heroism, expecting him to have answers. 2 weeks ago, Raymond began, his voice quiet but carrying, "I was dying on a gurney in an emergency room. A doctor looked at me and saw a homeless addict, a drain on the system, someone not worth saving." He paused. He wasn't entirely wrong. I had given up on myself. I believed I didn't deserve to live, that my survival was a mistake. The room was utterly silent now, but a security guard saw something different. A nurse saw something different. My daughter, who I had abandoned, saw something different. They saw a person, a veteran, a father, someone worth saving even when I didn't believe it myself. He looked at the memorial wall. I lost my best friend 32 years ago. Lost my wife 4 years ago. And I spent those years believing that the only way to honor them was to punish myself, to suffer, to disappear. I was wrong. His voice grew stronger. The best way to honor the fallen is to live, to help others live, to build something that makes their sacrifice mean something beyond grief and guilt. Carlos died trying to save his brothers. This center will save thousands of brothers and sisters who are still fighting battles long after the shooting stopped. The audience began to applaud, but Raymond raised his hand. "I'm not a hero," he said. "I'm a survivor. And surviving is what we do. We survive the war. We survive coming home. We survive the system that fails us. We survive the nightmares and the guilt and the weight of memories that never fade. And then, if we're lucky, we find people who refuse to let us survive alone." He looked at Emilia. "My daughter taught me that." He looked at Elena and Emily. "Carlos's family taught me that." He looked at Torres and Sarah and his brothers from service. "My fellow veterans taught me that." And now, he gestured to the center around them. "We're going to teach it to every veteran who walks through these doors. That you're not alone. That asking for help is strength, not weakness. That surviving isn't betrayal. That you deserve to live even when the weight makes you want to stop." The applause was deafening now. Veterans standing. Families crying. Homeless individuals wiping tears from weathered faces. "This center is named after me," Raymond said, "but it belongs to all of us. Every veteran who served. Every family that waited. Every brother and sister still fighting to find their way home." He looked at Carlos's photo one last time. "Welcome home. All of you. Welcome home." As Raymond stepped away from the microphone, Daniel Price and the other homeless veterans moved forward. One by one, they embraced him, not as a hero, not as a Medal of Honor recipient, but as one of them, as someone who understood. Torres saluted. Sarah hugged him. Palmer, Chun, and Williams formed up beside him like they were back in formation. Harrison struggled to his feet, leaning on his cane, his hand over his heart. And Emilia stood beside her father, tears streaming down her face, but smiling. Because for the first time in 4 years, she had her dad back. Not the perfect version, not the unbroken soldier, but the real man, scars and all, fighting his way back from the darkness one day at a time. Outside, the sun was setting. Raymond stood in the doorway of the center, looking at the city that had once felt like a prison of memories and now felt like possibility, like purpose, like home. He pulled out the challenge coin Daniel Price had given him, turned it over in his fingers, felt the weight of brotherhood, of connection, of people who refused to let him fall. "Still here," he whispered, "not just trying anymore, living."